welcome back to the Masters of Modern. I'm your host, Alex Kess, here with two co-hosts. I'm adding more. I've gone past the point where I just have a Pidgey, which is Ben, and now I have a Caterpie, and I did some grinding and got that one Pikachu in that first area. So, Joel and Carson, you can decide which one of you is Pikachu, which one of you is Caterpie.
I'm the fat Pikachu from the TCG card, like that specific art.
I don't want to be Caterpie.
Be a Butterfree.
I will accept Butterfree.
There was something. It was a TikTok that described someone in some. I think maybe it's One Piece as a Caterpie.
We also have enough XP that I'm definitely not still a Caterpie anymore. If I was fair. A Caterpie,
no, I'm grinding. I haven't gone into Brock yet. All right, we just haven't even hit a rock. We haven't got a badge. This is pre-badge podcasting. So that tangent. Okay. So hi, Joel and Carson. Anyway. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Good to be back.
Follow their Twitter handles are below their names. You should follow them. They're both great. They're great follows. Carson has been on the podcast a few times, and this is Joel's first time joining. And today we're having a wonderful conversation about, there's a lot of universes beyond product being added, and a lot of experimentation on like what worlds can appear within a Magic set. And even there was some leaked content from a poll that we'll talk about in a second as well. That's not like leaked Magic cards, which we want to talk about, but it's more like leaked possible ideas for future sets that I think is worth having a conversation about, and secret layers and et cetera. And so Joel and Carson are here to talk about that. Before we get started, I do want to do a few shout outs. First off, big shout out to our sponsor, Channel Fireball. If you want to buy cards, Magic cards, first off, congratulations to them. They are recently in the middle of a merger with TCG Player, our previous affiliate code person, so we'll figure that out. But in the meantime, still, definitely make sure to check out the Channel Fireball website and their storefront. If you use the code the MMcast at checking out, it benefits us. They shout us out. They like us more, and we want them to like us, and you want them to like us, and we want you to like them. So everyone can like each other. So please use if you want to buy some cards, buy them from there. They have really sweet options and a really cool storefront. Beyond that, big shout out to Ultra Barrel. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast as well. Now, as all podcasts on YouTube and other platforms need, there's a time and place where you have to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and now's that time. But we like to play a little game, and it's a little game that involves Magic trivia. And sometimes, now we don't have one from them today, but if you want to provide trivia questions, you can join our Patreon to do so. That's one of the options you can. Any patron can submit trivia questions that we use on the podcast, so make sure to check that out as well. But for the trivia question today, the way it's going to work is I'm going to ask Joel and Carson a trivia question. It's going to be Magic related. They're going to have to answer it. You guys have to answer it in the comments. You got to comment that answer below, because hopefully they'll hem and haw. Hopefully they don't just blurt it out and give you time to answer your comments. Then we'll give the answer. If you got it right, you don't have to do anything. You got it right. Congratulations. But if you got it wrong, you have to hit that like and subscribe button. That's the rules. You just, by hearing me say it, obligated to yourself to this game, and you have no choice but to deal. So the way this trivia is going to work is going to be a little bit different because we do have two guests. So we're going to do Prices Right rules. Which basically, I'm going to ask for a number. You want to get as close to the correct number without going over between the two of you. And then chat, you have to have fun as well. And the question, and it's going to be our theme for the set. So in Magic, until very recently, and in reality, mostly still true, there has only been one set in Magic to incorporate guns, and that was Portal of the Second Age. How many cards in Portal of the Second Age had guns? Do you want a coin flip to go first? So we don't.
No, I have no idea, so I'm just gonna guess. But what constitutes a gun? Because I know there's that artifact.
So
if bazooka.
That's why I'm specifying in Portal, in this set, because you're right. If it was any set, there's weird, Garblin Sharpshooter in a secret lair has a gun, right? So that only in for the most part, as far as Black Border goes, until literally this year, and not including promos, the only set to have shown guns in Magic was Portal Second Kingdom, or Second Age or whatever. How many cards in that set have guns?
You can go first, Carson. That's
How many cards are in the set? Are we allowed to know that before we guess?
I will see if I can find that out. I can give you that information. There are 165 cards.
And that was the last set to incorporate guns into the art. Let's see.
Outside, like there's unglued cards, right? Like there's BB
Sure.
gun is a card, and there's cannons and like pirate ships at some point.
We don't need to get into like what constitutes a gun.
Like when you look at the cards here, there's like it's got a flint, it's a muzzle, people are shooting
very
them.
Clearly a gun. I am gonna say out of 165 cards, I'm gonna say 45. I'm gonna say about a quarter of them have guns.
Okay, all right, Joel.
Its Price is Right, and I wanted you to go first because I'm going to say $1 Bob, just one card.
46.
All right, so now that we have all the locked in, we have 45 and 1. Please comments below. Put in your number and. I was going to put the Jeopardy theme song. I forgot. All right, we have the answer. It is 20 cards. There are 20 cards with illustrations containing gun in the set Portal Kingdoms. Of them, I don't believe any of them are super well-known cards.
I saw one in a tweet today, and I was like, okay.
There are some Night Stalkers. So that if you had under 20, you're good. But if you had over, you have to hit that like and subscribe button. So obviously with Secret Layers and Universes Beyond, with stuff like Stranger Things, stuff like the 2 different Lord of the Rings sets, we've had alternative art stuff like Godzilla and the Arcane set. We have just announced we had the Fortnite alternate skin cards announced and the Street Fighter straight to game cards and released previewed. So we know what both of those are going to look like. We also have, and I think people can already have bought the Street Fighter ones. I got to see them at Licensing Expo in person. They're really, really cool. You have the Lord of the Rings set coming out next year. And then on the other side of that coin, with all of these other properties being added to Magic has also decided to just really broaden what is considered kind of a fantasy plane, right? With both Neon Kamigawa and New Capenna, we have 2 sets that are much closer to sci-fi or modern day, or at least contemporary presentations of the world, where New Capenna was, turn of the century New York, or Gothic cities in Chicago, New York, etc.
Noir.
And
Batman the Animated Series.
Very Batman the Animated Series. And New Capenna, or not New Capenna, Neon Kamigawa was set in ostensibly a Matrix-y type of situation. And there's a lot of conversations recently on like how much do these incorporated outside of the classic Magic feel universe, good, bad, indifferent, and obviously for everyone listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But I brought Carson Joel because Carson is either going to be mildly or aggressively anti all of this future tech being incorporated in the game.
Yeah. So I've gone on record saying that I am pretty not comfortable with the aesthetic direction that Magic is taking recently. I was pretty vocal about in New Capenna. I think I did not want to see I didn't want to see Tommy guns. I didn't want to see Cadillacs. I didn't want to see a lot of the stuff a lot of the visual tropes of that style, of that noir genre. I didn't like Ob Nixilis in his pinstripe suit, armor, whatever you want to call it. That it's just it just doesn't fit with the picture in my head of what fits inside Magic. a lot of people are able to expand that a lot more freely than I am. And then in Kamigawa, we got a lot of vehicles that were just Gundams. I'm like, wow, this set is really anime, and I don't know how okay I am with it.
So I guess one question I have, because I think people agree. There's a level of Magic player that does agree with you, right? That there has been a decision to extrapolate out of Dungeons and Dragons, literally now that we're incorporating Dungeons and Dragons in the format, but Dungeons and Dragons Tolkien-esque fantasy worlds with unique spins based on cultural, where it's like a Theros or an Innistrad that was a much, more gothic fantasy, but still pre, like,
technologically limited.
Yeah.
Like Kaladesh, for example, I thought was an acceptable bend where like they had electricity and they had things that resembled cars, but they were magicified enough. But then in New Capenna, they were just like, it's called a jalopy. It's a car. It's literally just a car, and you have to deal with that. And I'm like,
also, I guess that's where I was going to kind of go next too. Is like, with Kaladesh, I don't like. There are mechs in Kaladesh, right? The Gearhulks were ostensibly mechs, and there was science fairs, and there was magic to it, but there was also a lot of like mechanical logic to it. There was vehicles, there was drag racers, and then often when you talk to Wizards employees and you point like, oh, sci-fi elements haven't really been in the game, they're like, Mirrodin exists. And Esper exists, and Mirrodin is like all robots all the time.
So a few years back, they sent out a survey that was like, would you be okay? How okay would you be with all of these aesthetic things in Magic? And one of them was like cyborgs. And I was like, oh, well, Tezzeret has a magical mechanical arm, is ostensibly a cyborg. So that makes sense. That's okay. If you showed me a T-800 skeleton from Terminator, that just breaks immersion. That's not something that fits within what I see as Magic. Right?
So,
like, you recognize that there's a gap between like Tezzeret and his mechanical arm, or magicified mechanical arm, and just like Arnold Schwarzenegger with a metal skull.
Well, I mean, we can talk about Secret Layers in a second, but I mean, like that literal character, I mean, as a trope is back, but like on both ends, right? Like the Phyrexians and what they're doing right now are a Terminator. What they're like, the way that they're using portals is that this portal, I guess it's reverse Terminator, where it doesn't let flesh through. So they get to show up as just their mechanical selves that like regrows all of the living flesh of their body. But Terminators have existed in Magic, and I also don't want like you picked an example and it just happens that this example is maybe not the perfect one, because Terminators as a concept in Magic are a thing, right? Like we've had that basic like.
But the whole argument about this thing is an aesthetic one, where like there's a way to do Terminators that works if you can develop the aesthetic in a way that fits the Magic brand, which again, the whole argument is that that's broadening, and how okay are we with that?
Yeah, sure. And I think that as an example is maybe like I think the car one, right? If there is now a taxi in Magic the Gathering,
literally just like a yellow taxi.
There are computer chips in Magic the Gathering on New Capenna, and that is significantly larger of leaps towards modern day than Magic has had. And one thing I will say that I like almost on an interesting level, and Kamigawa did this very well, is time does move forward, right? And as time moves forward, technology moves forward, and Kamigawa specifically showed like, oh, there's 1,000 years between the last time we were here and now. If you look at any society that we have any frame of reference in the real world for, that was like at that level that they were at in Kamigawa, and then at 1,000 years, you have computer chips.
Yeah.
So
that is a good point that justifies that chronologically. Yeah, it's
Magic
a weird
whole like Urza's over 1,000 years ago. Nicol Bolas is over 1,000 years ago. Nicol Bolas showing up for the first time. He's been around for like 10,000 years.
And another thing is like, I guess this is a little bit more flimsy because it's equally sci-fi and magic, but like time travel, time heists. They had a time heist in Avengers Endgame. Spoiler alert from 2 years ago. But they also had a time heist in Tarkir Block, where
Yeah. But I think
what's his face?
that was done, and I agree with there that they did a very good at making that a magical thing. It was like the spiritual
Yeah.
husk of a dragon was able to connect you to the past through magic to be able to go do that thing. Versus
That was definitely like, while I was saying it, I realized, oh, that actually works just fine in both sci-fi and magic,
yeah,
depending
time
on
travels because it doesn't work in real life.
it is magical. It's just the only difference is how you try to explain it in the world that you're using it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
even like most science fiction that uses time travel waves away the logic of it with magic because there's no actual way it works.
And I would argue that most IPs that try to explain how it works are much worse for it.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's kind of why I think Kaladesh was so good, though, because like it has a mechanic, the energy mechanic of like explaining how all of that stuff worked. That's why like Kaladesh to me was so cool and fine about it. I think if New Capenna had some type of mechanic associated as to why they were at this technology level, because like Kamigawa has reconfigure and all this other like mechanical stuff built in, and that's why it can absorb it as magic. Whereas like New Capenna, I'm kind of in your field with that. New Capenna was like, we got mob stuff, and all of the stuff has to do with families, and there's no explanation of it. There's just like angels that are there to explain away things. But I think Kaladesh was like, we got energy, it makes this thing, and this is why we're in this golden age. And then Kamigawa also is like, we have grown and modified, and we can reconfigure and become better. So like having a computer chip kind of made sense to me, I guess. But that might come down to, I guess, a part of the discussion of like, what is sci-fi to you? Because I think nowadays in libraries they slap sci-fi on like Sword of Truth, and Lord of the Rings has a sci-fi sticker on it.
Well, I mean, I think like there's an argument that sci-fi and fantasy is the same genre, right? Because like the like base level nerd philosopher point is that Star Wars is a fantasy movie series, not a sci-fi movie series, right? Because
Right.
like yes,
Yeah,
there's
I was gonna
spaceships
say,
and guns, but also like there's space wizards and they fight with swords.
yeah, it's just high fantasy with like a space theme painted over it.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think I agree. I agree that it's new territory, right? Like it definitely. But I also like I love Magic exploring tropes in the way that Magic can explore tropes. I think like Wizards to me, and I know this is not necessarily true for everyone, but Wizards to me has more often done a good job of like picking a genre and then exploring how their mechanics would function within it. And I think that what we got out of Neon Kamigawa in regards to that kind of sci-fi, dystopian sci-fi, what we got out of New Capenna, what we got out of Theros, what we got out of Innistrad have all been like really, really exciting to see them play with those tropes. Honestly, my bigger complaints for New Capenna and Neon Kamigawa is more about the fact that they're only one set, right? Like I wish we got two sets for each of those. More so ironically, not ironic, maybe ironically, but with New Capenna, just because like the story feels so small there because you set up the problem and then a card layer you've resolved the problem in the same pack versus historically these stories were told over blocks where like you have three sets to say like here's the problem in the first set, second says like here's why this problem's a problem, third says and this is how we solve the problem. Now it's like here's everything at once, and it's one of the reasons I think actually the commander decks should be resolution themed. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it like because now within sets you have the commander product release and the regular product release, and the preview season do happen separately. And I think it would be interested to allow the main set releases be the world building sets, and then those commander products be the ending, so that there is a little bit of that two punch if you're going to be stuck on these planes only for a second.
Yeah. So I guess maybe a question for Carson would like, say we had burned a whole nother set on New Capenna and they fleshed out like more of a Genesis story to the world, giving you some backstory to it, would that have maybe like made it more easily digestible instead of just like boom, cars out the gate?
I
Because
I'm
arguably Kaladesh has the same thing, but I think the whole like energy mechanic and Sahili being there and that explanation of that world and how it functioned, and I think the callback to like Chandra, there's already history there. I think if maybe the set was more fleshed out and gave you
I
an
think that
example of
was
how it
part of it.
works.
I also think visually it was a lot more distinct from stuff that we have in real life. Kaladesh was compared to New Capenna, where New Capenna was just like, it's literally just a car from the 1930s on a magic card.
Because I think arguably Ravnica could also do the same thing. They're like futuristic steampunk kind of mixture based on the vast amount of TTRPG research I've had to do. You have like electricity, plumbing, you can get a coffee, but there's no cars there because there's rage beasts running through the streets. Like it's that balance. Because I think I would agree with you that like if I look up sci-fi, there's a picture of the Enterprise. If we had a Star Trek set, I would probably maybe that's a little outside my purview. But if
Oh, we're
we're
about to
talking
get one.
about like
It's an unset, but we're going to space this year. Right. We're supposed to be going to space this month. Like the reason this fall is going to feel, this entire year is going to feel very weirdly like busy, and then like a 2-month period of no content is because Infinity was delayed. But we're about to go to the Star Trek set, right? Like that's the next theme.
I think them like bookending that with an unset, I think is a good way to like cap their span of what they're talking about. Because again, with tabletop RPGs and D&D, for me, you've got a fantasy realm. You've got people who can be gunslingers. There's literally a vehicle and a mech in D&D. The return of Spelljammer and like doing space adventures within fantasy. If you've listened to like Adventure Zone, there's like a whole arc about them doing that kind of mixture stuff. And I think that's cool because it's believable and you have like a background to it. Which is why, for me, someone who knows nothing about like Warhammer coming up, the only thing I know about Warhammer is that the orcs believe really hard in Orc Jesus, and that's how their ships fly. And that's kind of like ridiculous to me, but I can take that. But I'm apprehensive about that set because that's pushing that like Star Trek how sciency.
Sure, I guess I think one other one question I have is do you feel like New Capenna maybe was a step over the line, and maybe Kamigawa as well, partially because those tropes are more familiar than, like, because it was both modern as well as extraordinarily familiar tropes,
So
but versus
by familiar, do you
something?
mean well known, or do you mean like close to real life?
Both.
I think the closeness to real life is a big part of it. But if one of the editors wants to pull up the card Arc Splitter from Streets of New Capenna, that's just a Tommy gun made of lightning.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like,
but that's still kind of like I could see somebody a gunslinger in like a D&D campaign rip that out of a dungeon and like, all right, let's see and roll this and see if my thing explodes. But also, it's a cool magic item.
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
do agree the like real life or the history as a supporting pillar. Like I don't know
and
how
specifically the
digestible.
recent history.
Yeah,
I think is a big part of it, or like the Gundam parts of Kamigawa, and I guess like the evolution sense makes it make more sense, where like that is a logical conclusion to the 1,000-year time jump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
I think the nostalgia of the set is probably like a good supportive pillar for them to take. If you have nostalgia and a previous kaiju set to take a step towards Gundams, I think that's a cool support to where they can like push their boundaries. And then New Capenna is like, hey, we have some old characters and some history we kind of know about, and then we're gonna take that bound into like cars and other weird stuff. it makes the jump less comfortable, I guess.
Well, so like, because there's a lot of things in New Capenna that don't have this problem, right? Like the
Right.
cabaret vibe, like that whole world, gangsters in a fantasy city of skyscrapers, like that's all stuff that could exist in high fantasy without too much effort.
Yeah.
Whereas so the line is almost just the equipment. It's the guns and the outfit
The
and the suits
technology.
and the technology in the and the cars versus anything else. But could you do that set without those things? Like, is it worth?
That's a
maybe
good
the question is it worth doing in the first place? But
and part of this, do we want to? I can't remember the name of what's the contraband substance in New Capenna?
Halo.
I think Halo was a big misstep where, like, you have to have something that is similar to Halo or other substances, but they spent way too much time talking about what Halo wasn't, that became the focus of the conversation, and that's also another thing that, like, I don't think you can have an effective gangster story without something like Halo, and I think that was a big ball drop with New Capenna.
So, and this is kind of, well, I mean, I think we've had this conversation. I feel like we had this conversation on this podcast, but I'm a big proponent for Halo existing in the franchise, and I understand why Wizards, Hasbro corporate, who sells a card game that they tell Walmart and Target is for children, has to be a little bit weird with it. But the like pearl clutching from the Magic community about either the fact that they like knew why Hasbro was doing that corporate thing, and they also like Spice exists in Dune and Star Wars. Like Han Solo is a drug runner, like actively.
Oh yeah.
So like from my perspective, the like. Then I'm gonna call it pearl clutching, but because there was some of that, and some of it was more just poking fun at it. Like a set in this time period having a illicit substance that people are trading, and then that substance in the show being magical totally makes sense for me. The only misstep was that 2-store letter flyer, which wasn't even supposed to be public, saying like, "Hey, don't serve alcohol at your pre-releases, but feel free to like do candy or other things on theme." And like the small joke that it was angel dust. But even then, like, I feel like that has more of a problem with the fact that the whole set was presented all at once than it has to do with anything else.
Yeah, I wasn't really objecting to them using Halo, or, you know, whatever they wanted to call the contraband substance. But the amount of gymnastics they had to do to say that, like, it is this illicit substance that has these effects and is heavily regulated, and there's bootleggers and all that crap, all of the typical gangster tropes that you're familiar with around Prohibition and whatnot. But also it's not any of that for the purposes of advertising. Was it was interesting to watch. And
I think that whole bit kind of maybe loosened its like fictional setting, its fictional placeholder, because again, to harken back to like Ravnica, I could see this whole set maybe tinged a little bit differently happening in Ravnica. But if you're going to bring up an illicit substance, like, take responsibility for it and run for it, because when that leg's wobbly, you can feel that whole set kind of like lose its balance, and I think that's maybe the disconnect there.
I haven't seen Dune yet, so I'm not going to talk about that. But in Star Wars, in all of the live action stuff that I can think of, I'm a little shaky on the like Han Solo movie itself. They don't talk about what spice does or what it is. It's just a thing that is illegal, that is smuggled. It's usually talked about in a smuggling sense.
Sure,
because there's so
but like
many
in Lord of the Rings,
smugglers.
they get high and drink copious amounts of alcohol. I mean, if it's just alcohol too, that like the amount of alcohol drinking in fantasy content is
right.
significant.
But they own it. They don't put a disclaimer before the movie that's like, you know, don't serve alcohol at your Lord of the Rings premiere.
Sure. and I do think like your point about Ravnica is also really interesting, because once again, I think that has more to do with the like the failings of the plot of the set. Like, this world exists because of they want to do a New York themed gangster set. Fine.
Yep.
To have a New York themed gangster set, you want to have Halo be involved. There needs to be a smuggled out thing going. There needs to be illicit contraband for there to be illicit actions.
Yes.
And
I think Halo would have been successful if they had put it in a story and demonstrated the effects and the illicitness, and if they hadn't done an article about here's what Halo isn't.
Which to my point, they did do that. A letter that they sent to stores that were going to do pre-releases, telling them the guidelines of what they're allowed and not allowed to do, got not leaked on the internet, but got posted on the internet.
Right.
So, like, you're right, but in a way that is like
on the Wizards website as part of the world building campaign for New Capenna, they were like, Halo does this stuff, is not this stuff. Rather than
that was only after that got posted on the internet, and they had to play like back and forth ball. Because, like, if you open a pack of Magic cards, Halo is what Halo is, right? There's nothing in a pack that you buy, or right now, if you go to any event moving forward, if you interact on New Capenna in any way, Halo is very obviously alcohol made out of angels that is worthwhile for powering Magic. I think if anything, I think I remember early on there was a Halo is not going to be like energy, where it's not a like secondary resource. It's just an in-story resource, which is fine because energy was a mechanic that is maybe unbalanceable.
Introducing new resources has proven difficult to do well in the past.
Yeah.
Just make it a treasure. It'll be fine.
It's fine. It's totally fine.
But yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from now. With the suspension of disbelief is usually your mind can fill in the gaps of where things need to be. But when someone restricts what your imagination is supposed to be, that's like that skit of, hey guys, we're an improv group. Give us a suggestion, but not X, Y, or Z thing. Like, you're kind of...
exactly what you're going to be talking about.
I don't think that issue has anything to do with cabs and guns showing up in Magic either, right? Like yes, that's a problem specifically with Halo, but that's not an issue in Kamigawa at all, right? There's nothing on that set where they're like, and there is still Gundams on it that maybe are a step too far. For the record, I mean, I love all of this. I want Magic to do I would love to see Magic Star Trek. And then
that is very pro every single IP being absorbed into Magic.
Yeah, give me Super Smash Brothers, the card game.
All right, let me then push back some ground. Maybe it's just the millennial in me and the dislike for Zoomers, but I'm not a fan of the Fortnite stuff. I don't think that's
well. But do you like?
Since okay, so that does
bring us as a segue to what I wanted to bring us to next. Let's talk Secret Layers.
Perfect.
I think Secret Layers, them being a reskin of the card, is okay. But if we had a whole set for Fortnite, that's a bit much for me, dog.
Well, I mean, we're gonna have a whole Warhammer set. We've had two Dungeons and Dragons sets. We've had Stranger Things, Street Fighter, and those are the main
Walking Dead
and Walking Dead, and all 6 have different levels of like. There are people that don't, Walking Dead, I would argue, has more vehemently people against it than people being like Fortnite is cringe, right?
Yeah, I think that was a mechanical thing.
Yeah, Walking Dead had a lot of problems. Most of which have been addressed.
I'm more referring to because The Walking Dead has the same mechanical problem that Stranger Things and Street Fighter have, right? It's more of the content of the property that I was saying people have an issue with.
That too.
Which, like, on the bounce back, Phyrexians exist in Magic, and they do very horrifying things to people. The next one being, Stranger Things and Street Fighter.
Street Fighter
are bringing in like if I don't care about I guess my point is like nothing in the Fortnite one is requiring you to play Fortnite, interact with those or buy those cards, but by having another player have those cards, does that take you out of the experience?
Not really. Since it's just a reskin Secret Layer one-off, and those cards can appear somewhere else as a different card, that's not a big deal to me because I can jump back to the original.
Okay, and I guess before we continue, how do we, just like one sentence, how do each of you feel about outside IP being in Secret Layers as not just reskinned cards, but as brand new cards that exist exclusively as those characters?
I'll go first.
You don't have to answer it on the spot if you don't want to, but
I will say I'm okay with it as long as there is a commitment to like an in Magic universe printing in the near future. So like the turnaround on the Stranger Things stuff was what, like 6 months? Was it a year?
Between actual arrival of the actual product and the cards being in packs, it was like a month. I think it was even sooner than that, right?
Yeah, so that would be an acceptable turnaround on that. So yeah, as long as there's like a not Stranger Things version that I can buy reasonably soon, then
Joel.
thumbs up.
Yeah,
then I'm okay.
That's kind of where I'm at with The Walking Dead, and those only being available there. It's kind of like whack for people being able to like get a hold of those. But like when I saw Zangief and the Street Fighters, I whirlwind slammed that buy button, and they're like, it's going to show up later, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I want a big Russian bear guy to like beat people up. That's so cool. And then later you can have that card, and that's cool.
Well, yeah. And I guess so. Just as we're all
you
saying,
tweeted recently about this.
I hate the Magic versions of those cards.
Now, okay, walk us through that.
Yeah. So I currently hate how the Stranger Things versions of the Magic cards were done. Can I think that there's a way to do it in a way that I don't hate? Absolutely. Having them be two separate cards with no mention on them other than SLD004 on the bottom of the Innistrad one. Having that then come out in New Capenna. So Innistrad characters are randomly on New Capenna. Having them all be relatively made up Innistrad characters, right? It's not like we got like cool references to other characters that we knew. So it was like there's a headspace for a character that I don't even have because I haven't played limited with this character. This character doesn't show up in the story. And then lastly, having the just like in not every databases, because some of these are better than some, but they like can't handle having these two cards be the same thing. So on the Decked app, you can't even search Will the Wise or 11 the Mage. You have to like know the name of these Innistrad characters that I've never seen before to even find them in that app. That's not true of everywhere. For instance, on Scryfall, you can search for one and the correct one will show up. But what the default one is not always true. And then if you look at like stuff like Spell Table, if you put in Will the Wise as my commander, it'll show up as your commander the black and white Innistrad character the whole game. So like my brain hates that aesthetic. Now, I think Wizards realize that maybe like there's licensing issues here though, and I think that's what their plan is moving forward. But I like the skinning idea, right? I love the Godzilla cards. I have no problem with the Godzilla cards having two different versions and having the name of the character underneath, because by having the name of the character underneath, like they did for Godzilla, King of the Monsters, right? The main one, the one that was a buy box, we still haven't gotten the card.
Delortha Strength Incarnate
doesn't exist. I think it exists on Moto, possibly, but or we've seen the art for it.
We've seen the art. Like, it might exist on Moto. It doesn't exist on Arena. It doesn't exist in a playable form on Arena, I should say.
And it doesn't exist in paper. And those layers to me bother me. If they were New Capenna characters that showed up in New Capenna, maybe it would be more okay. If they had the names of one side on one of the other cards, so I just, at least when I'm playing with my card, if I need to look up what that card is, I can see it on the card itself. Either be it on the Secret Layer one saying, on the Secret Layer version of Hawkins Lab, it said Havengal Laboratory in the small secondary window. I'd probably have less of an issue with it. But as is, the situation that we're in now, I hate it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think what the arcane ones have like the name of it below it, right?
Yeah, arcane. All of the skin versions. Fortnite does it. Yeah. Arcane does it. Godzilla did it.
All the times where they're in an IP, in a different IP, but they're reprints. They show the name of the legal Magic card that they're referencing.
And I would,
but they don't do that when they're like pre-printing.
the two arguments I have against the secret layers are a gateway that makes it so these cards aren't available and they can't ever reprint. You're creating a new reserve list, blah, 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 blah. Three things. One, they're going to do this at a pack soon. Like, the Lord of the Rings set is going to exist. And there's no way that they're going to reprint every single card in the Lord of the Rings set as a Magic version. They can if one becomes too expensive, but they're not going to reprint all of them. Two, that's also true with the Warhammer set. Like, that entire deck is going to be Warhammer cards. Maybe some of them are going to be either reskins or making it even more unfathomably confusing. They're going to be just like, oh, Lightning Bolt makes sense both in Warhammer and Magic. So there's going to be the Warhammer Lightning Bolt, but it's not going to be a reskinned one, or it's not going to be a secondary card that's different than the reprinted version.
If I had to guess, I would just say that like at least half of each of those decks is just going to be Magic cards with Warhammer art. Like, they just put Lightning Bolt in one of those decks. That's my guess.
Yeah.
It's just
don't
a guess.
know.
I have no idea.
If they do, I will be upset.
I don't think they're developing 500 brand new cards for the Warhammer decks.
Well, I mean, they could. That's
what they did. 400 or whatever.
Well, not yet, because it's not than that, right? It's 60 times that many, but
yeah, because however many lands.
Yeah.
Show up.
I think we'll get like a Soul Ring, but it'll be like, I don't know anything about Warhammer, but it's going to be like the main Warhammer MacGuffin, and it'll be like Soul Ring.
Right.
Warhammer MacGuffin in brackets.
So I guess before I lose that thought, if they did a little story aside about each one of the Stranger Things characters to kind of like incorporate them in, would that have like clued you into being more on board with them?
That would be a step in the right direction. The fact that it's in New Capenna would be a step back, but that would be a step in the right direction.
Having them show up in New Capenna packs was really weird. I agree with that. Pretty much all of your criticisms are super fair about those cards.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens myself with the Street Fighter ones, because with Stranger Things and all the seasons of stuff, I always saw their characters as them in the D&D game. So like when I see 11 the mage, I know that 11 is like the mage in their party in the show. So for me, I didn't have to make that jump, but I can understand seeing those like Innistrad characters. You're like, who are you? And I guess my brain just kind of flipped to them being their like Stranger Things counterpart.
Those characters are more, take me more out of they're more not universe, but what was the word you used earlier, Carson?
Immersion breaking.
Yeah, those cards are more immersion breaking to me than the Stranger Things cards existing themselves. Because the Stranger Things existing themselves are like, oh yeah, that's what those are. Like, my brain can handle, oh, they did this with cards. Those are cool cards. I also am fine with people having cool proxies that are Star Wars characters of regular card, whatever. Yeah. Versus I have them. Elmar, Uvenwald, and Formant feels like a Magic fan fiction card. Is I think my problem with them. Right. But the last point is there are more Stranger Things cards printed. Not more. This is true. There are more Stranger Things cards printed than I believe any, for sure, Mythic, and I think even possibly rare Modern Horizons 2 card. I know for sure that's true of the the Walking Dead one. Stranger Things one I don't know as well. I would imagine that Stranger Things is more popular than Walking Dead. But from the perspective of like rarity, yes, you can't reprint them. And if you had a Ragavan level tournament playable card in the Stranger Things set, that would be a problem. And sometimes trusting Wizards on that is maybe a mistake. But
you mean a Rick or a Glenn tournament playable card?
But like Rick is not turn. I mean, it sees play in a Legacy. First off, Legacy doesn't dictate card prices. Two, Legacy is also not a real. I mean, it's a real format. Love Legacy. Legacy is a really blessed. The problem is you're never going to find
here, folks. Legacy's not a real format.
It's not. I live in the second largest metropolis in the United States and in a top 10 metropolis in the world, and I have to drive an hour to get to a Legacy tournament if I'm lucky to have 6 people show up to it.
Yeah, let me crack all 4 of my jeweled lotuses and doubling cube them because it's Legacy. Like, but yeah, we'll see if I get those Street Fighter cards and they don't have like the other card named underneath them. I think you have swayed me, and I'm down to be on your side about if they reprint them and don't include that name. I think that's a solid point on that.
Right, and I think for the problem on the other hand is that there's licensing agreements, right? And what Wizards said to their part of the licensing agreement for the Street Fighter game and the thing, and when they sold them on was your character will exist in our game, and we won't have the little skin name on it'll be an original character in our game, and a Wizards got around it by being able to reprint this shadow mirror version of them, but. Yeah, so that's my personal complaint with that situation. Now, as far as world-breaking sides of it, this conversation will be going on forever, and it's going to be a big conversation once the Lord of the Rings set becomes an active thing that we're getting previewed. And
aesthetically, Lord of the Rings is much closer to traditional Magic aesthetic than Star Trek or Prohibition New York City. The biggest difference there is the characters that you're familiar with in the Lord of the Rings. But if you took a store brand Gandalf, that could just be a Magic character. That could be Elminster. Elminster and Gandalf could be interchangeable aesthetically.
So, I also don't like Elminster. if honestly, I think the Planeswalker, the D&D Planeswalkers also are my least favorite thing of all of these type of things, because Planeswalkers are so specific to these world planar characters that can show up in any story. I've had people be like, "Oh wait, is Lotlith not a Magic character? Oh, does she not?" I've had people that play Magic
is the god instead. I that was also the first thing that hit me, because when I saw D&D show up, I'm like, Planeswalk is a 7th level, or Plane Shift is a 7th level spell. Some doofus Bobbert the Goblin could Plane Shift into Ravnica and be like, "Hey guys, what's up? Oh, there's Ralzeric." We're both just high level RPG mages, and we just teleported there, and it's no big thing. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, the specifics of how D&D handles it, but because there's also gods in Magic, right? And they're creatures. So that,
and it's going to be weird in Lord of the Rings, because there's kind of
weirder. Yeah.
There's not really another plane. There kind of is, because that's what the ring actually does. Is it teleports you to an astral plane rather than just making you invisible.
There's another plane, right? It's the West. It's where everyone goes on boats. It's where Gandalf is from. I think you could do.
There's Gandalf, another plane in terms of a surface, but in the world of Lord of the Rings, it's just if you flew to Japan.
No. There's where the gods live is not.
Yes, it really is that
separate section of is a different planar of existence. No.
Nope. It's just another continent. Yep.
Yeah. It's real hand waving,
and goes to where the gods live, and they rebirth him as Gandalf the White. He doesn't go travel. His body does. It does, right. His spirit goes somewhere and then comes back. I believe there is a separate space of where that happens.
There's a separate continent for all higher planar beings, but to not get too crunchy, Gandalf is a very unique being.
So my point is that there's 5 of him, likely right?
There's 5 wizards, and then there's Sauron as the angel level characters.
So get rid of the 2 blue wizards, and there's
the 2 blue wizards. Get rid of Radagast. He doesn't matter. You have Saruman, Gandalf, Sauron.
If those are the 3 planeswalkers, I think that works.
An argument could be made for any. Yes, those are the characters that I'm predicting would be planeswalkers as well.
Yeah. But also, before the comments get after you, it's Lolth. It's a weird name. Don't get at him. It's a weird name.
He got it mixed up with Lotleth, which is I think a region in Ravnica.
Yeah. I want you to yell at me in the comments.
Yeah, so I think both Magic and Hearthstone have some kind of commercial where it's real life. I think Magic in the 90s had a commercial of there's a goblin in an arena and somebody else adds another creature and they fight, and they're like, oh, that's what Magic is about. And I think Hearthstone has the same thing with some knight guy. And I think it could be a possible disconnect for me. For me, it's kind of funny, but I could see Carson definitely us playing Commander, and he has this army of the Last Alliance of men and elves, and I'm like, I have one huge Russian who's going to spinning pile driver your Sauron and send him straight to the graveyard. Like, that's hilarious to me.
I love that. And so, by the way, my complaint about the Dungeons and Dragons characters showing up in Magic is more of a point of like, I like all of this. I would like them to continue doing it. But if I were to pick of the things that they've done so far, the thing that seems the most like out of the spectrum of what happens in the Magic universes, those Planeswalkers are those to me. Like, all of the reskin cards are reskin, so like those aren't real. And then even the like I could imagine a plane that is just Street Fighter. I mean, obviously the fact that they're like in America and Russia is a little weird, but nothing that happens in that game is not something that I like that couldn't exist. It's people punching each other.
Right. If they just renamed the places, it would be a Magic plane.
Yeah, like we have cars now, so even that mini game is possible. And Stranger Things, to be honest, is not that out of like. I realize why they put it in Innistrad. Like, it's not that different than everything that's happened on Innistrad is what happens on Stranger Things, other than it's in the 80s, in the 80s.
Yeah, pretty much.
But and those existing as creatures don't break the game of Magic. Magic exists in a bunch of different universes. Some of those universes could be the show Stranger Things, but the one thing that has been constant is Planeswalkers, which the D&D sets break. That's I guess my main point there.
So we got to have the wizards be planeswalkers. The Rohirrim need horsemanship, and
wizards, cowards. I would bring back horsemanship.
Horsemanship is in this game. I think you could do it. I think if Lord of the Rings set could have horsemanship in it.
At least 2 points where a single cavalry charge basically wins a cataclysmic battle.
There's only 2 relevant flying creature types in the entire set. The Nazgul and the Eagles.
And the Eagles.
What else flies?
Dragons. There's definitely dragons in there.
There's one. Yeah, there is Smog. So 3 things. 3 flyers in the entire game, which you can still have, but then if everything has horsemanship, the mechanical need for flying is being accomplished without having to like invent.
And you're just swapping the roles that horsemanship and flying play in the game.
Right. Flying just becomes unblockable unless you have dragons and/or eagles.
Flying becomes almost unblockable, and horsemanship becomes flying for limited.
Right.
If we don't get a reskinned Siege Rhino as an Oliphant in Lord of the Rings, I will be upset. That's my one call out.
Siege Rhino. Well, I guess that's the question. How much of the Lord of the Rings set do you think is going to be reskins versus new cards? I think it's going to be more comparable to Modern Horizons 2, where most of the cards are new versus.
I agree with that. Yeah. I think I could see a lot of the lower rarity stuff being closer to like 60-40, 70-30, but I think I think it's going to be like Dominaria, where there's a legendary theme. Because so much of what happens in Lord of the Rings is focused around all the characters, and there's so many named characters and places and objects.
It's also a good saga.
Yep.
Set, right? Like I like Dominaria as an example because like the saga of Smog and the saga of
Forging
Moria,
of the One Ring.
The Forging of the One. Yeah, exactly. There's so many things you can do there.
I think it's gonna feel a lot like Dominaria, where there are infinite legendary creatures and other legendary things, and there's a legendary theme. Obviously, it's gonna be Modern Horizons style legality, so we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, I think almost all of the higher rarity stuff is going to be new cards, and I don't know about the lower rarity stuff.
And that, like, we're in a weird moment where we have like old cards or like regular cards that are reskinned that fit Lightning Bolt in Baldur's Gate. You have cards that are not in that universe, but will eventually have that universe reprintings. And Lord of the Rings is going to be really interesting because so far it's only been Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons is owned by Wizards, so this is not an issue. But the moment that these cards become an IP from outside the company, but in a set that's large enough that you are going to have hundreds of draft commons that like in 30 years could never be reprinted. How do you do, and some of it could just be names, right? That's the one other saving grace, is it could just be like crossing the river, and the artwork shows them having, running away from the Nazgul. That can be reprinted in Magic, no problem.
Yeah.
It just is
You
now
come
called.
you come to a river, I think is a D&D card.
Well, yeah, that's why I knew that.
I think a lot of the lower rarity stuff is going to be generic enough that they can reprint it, and like halflings at some point they're going to reuse halflings.
Well,
like that's the biggest thing.
Are there going to be hobbits in this set? I don't think you can call them halflings. They're going to be called hobbits.
I think they'll be called hobbits in the card. Oh yeah, that's true.
There's no way Wizards is allowed to print a card that says, they're not allowed to print a card that is going to be in a set like this, where it is a unique creature to that card. Like if they did a reskin, maybe they could do it, but in this, where it says halfling instead of hobbit on a card, I don't, or any other thing other than a hobbit.
The hobbits are the biggest tricky thing, because that is pretty unique to Lord of the Rings. I could see them doing, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to handle hobbits.
They probably can call Nazgul horrors, right? They can. Everyone else is a wizard or
horrors or wraiths, or there's a few ways to do Nazgul. Everything else is generic: elves, dwarves, humans, wizards.
Yeah.
No chance they're going to reuse Kithkin. Like just putting that out there.
There's Ent's the other one.
Tree folk.
Yeah, tree folk.
It's weird. Though. If I got an Ent and it said tree folk on it, I'd be a little disappointed.
Really?
I think so. And if they're doing it, if they're not, I would understand it, I guess, but it would be a little like.
I need more reasonably costed cards for my Doran deck, because Lorben only printed one box of like whatever stuff they got.
Okay. Kess, what is the difference between an Ent and a tree folk?
Branding. That's it, fair. Right? Like, I mean, tree folk are literally just Wizards' version of Ents that they could use the name of.
Yeah, Ents are just the Tolkien version of tree folk.
There's also no difference between there are differences between halflings and hobbits, but they're all very specifically made to differentiate. And it's stuff
halflings and hobbits. Yeah,
halflings aren't from the Shire, and halflings aren't necessarily like non-violent, only like to eat food and don't like going on adventure.
Notably. In the Lord of the Rings, there are a lot of other creatures similar to hobbits. Like, canonically, Smeagol was originally, quote unquote, not a hobbit. Functionally a hobbit.
He's like a water hobbit, which is
some kind of river. Yeah.
Yeah, he
something
took the
similar.
Water specialty hobbit.
legally different from a hobbit. So
I don't think it was legally. I think it was. He existed.
Well, no, I mean, like, nominally he's different from a hobbit, but he's not really.
There's no way to do a Lord of the Rings set without Golem Smeagol. Is he a hobbit? If the hobbit creature type is in the game? Or is he like horror?
He's a rogue. He's a rogue with Skulk.
He has to have Skulk.
You have to have like a... There are very few non-token creatures with just job as a title.
I think, however they do Hobbit, he's going to be that plus
horror.
Maybe plus horror. I was thinking the same thing. I wouldn't be mad if they stapled Rogue on there, but I also wouldn't be mad if they didn't.
It could be Hobbit Wraith.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because Wraith has like ghost
qualities. All
right?
of the Wraiths in Lord of the Rings are long-term ring holders.
Yes.
Like the definition in Lord of the Rings, a wraith is a ring bearer of a long period of time. The humans are doing it a lot
hold
longer.
The rings. Importantly,
critically,
the ring wraiths still have rings, and they occupy another plane of existence simultaneously.
Yes,
which is how
that is true.
So, but yeah, they could do something like Hobbit horror or something like that for Gollum.
So let me just try to clarify some stuff from earlier, just to like get a better idea, I guess. So Carson, you're like, I'm cool with new sets as long as they like reach. I have a ceiling of like what's believable as far as that goes, and then
in the fantasy Magic setting that I'm accustomed to, there's been some breaches into more futuristic or recently familiar historical settings that make me uncomfortable.
So you've got like a Hobbit-sized ceiling on what's acceptable for stuff. I would say maybe I fit in between like D&D and tabletop RPGs. That ceiling's a little bit higher, and then is Kess like Willy Wonka, just do whatever we want? This is crazy town. I love it. Give me more. Is that like a pretty?
Yeah. I think also like Fortnite has helped move the overturn window of what's acceptable in a Magic set much farther towards my level.
So, do you want
both from? I think that internally has happened at Wizards as well. They're like, well, if we can do Fortnite, I guess we can put Tommy guns in our set.
Let's drop into Tomato Town, guys. Watch out for Spider-Man and Darth Vader. You know.
Kess doesn't want Smash Bros. He wants Fortnite, the card game.
It's like, and I'm now going to talk shit about NFTs for a second. This is why I think the concept of why people think NFTs are marvelous is like so bonkers to me, because like games have been doing this forever. Fortnite has like copyrighted characters for other games that you get to now incorporate into it. Magic the Gathering has been doing this basically since the beginning of the trade. They invented this. They invented the NFT, but in card form. Like, it's so dumb to me that like people think like, oh, it's going to be cool that I can like take my Spider-Man character and move it into this game and then put it into this game, and just like all of these corporations are doing that already. Welcome to Smash Brothers. It's maybe bad, but I also get to like maybe one day get an X-Wing and a Magic card and shoot Gandalf with it.
Just slap this cranial plating on Gandalf and go to town, you know? Like,
relating to X-Wing on a Magic card, we saw a custom Star Wars set that included this phrase, and we saw a silver border card include the phrase. I think a silver border card included this phrase: destroy target player. Thoughts?
I love it. Just doesn't work in the rules, right? Just target player loses the game is more like Door to Nothingness was originally concepted to be target player loses the game, and then they had to.
It literally says target player loses the game on it. That's what.
No, sorry. It originally it said destroy target player. Like Morrow, when he concepted the card, it just said destroy target player, and the guy was like, "This is not how the rules work. But you can't just have it say target player loses the game.
We can make this work, but not with these words."
Yeah, and I think they thought about it. I think they like tried making it happen.
It's that like Doom counter. What's that guy's name?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the countdown Doom counter.
It's Baron von Count. Let's see. When the Doom counter... Wait. Hang on.
Yeah, destroy target player.
With Doom counter on 5, whenever you cast a spell with the indicated numeral in its mana cost, text, box, power, or toughness, move the Doom counter 1 numeral to the left. When the Doom counter moves from 1, destroy target player and put that Doom counter on 5. Yeah, that card exists because Mark Rosewater tried making Door to Nothingness into this, and he failed, and this is now where it is.
Like, I like the idea of destroy target player. That just gives me the good brain chemicals. Just like, there's a sorcery spell with trample. I think that's cool.
I agree. I like the word destroy target player, but I also recognize that there's just words in the game that exist already that do the exact same thing and don't involve having to
those are game words that have specific meanings that don't mean that thing.
Right, and like it makes like destroy target permanent. Is a player a permanent? Is a player a planeswalker? Because a player is a planeswalker. If a card says destroy target planeswalker, so it makes it weirder.
Yeah.
Why doesn't my angel, my Avacyn, protect me from being destroyed, you know?
Yes, yeah. If all things are indestructible, or all everything has protection from whatever. The one thing I will say, okay, so the last thing I want to talk about before we're done is the most recent leak of content. So basically, and this is how Kamigawa was originally leaked, is they send a like confidential poll that people get randomly selected to do a poll, take that poll on, and there's images and they often get your feedback on it. That's where Carson mentioned an early version of that had the word cyborg and how people felt about it. I think that was the one that had also different artwork for Kamigawa characters that was like, how do you feel about hacker characters? That that was actually one that they didn't know that I like had a friend who worked at Wizards and they didn't know that had been leaked. And I was like, oh, right. So like,
well, the one that
Neon
I was talking
Kamigawa,
about
right?
was specifically like released to consumers for us to take. Like, how do we as Magic players feel about cyborgs and spaceships and sci-fi concepts? That was the one that I was talking about.
And it had images of like a planeswalker that definitively looked like they were from Kamigawa, and they were
techie hacker.
They're like a hacker, right? It was like a hacker.
Yeah.
And how would you feel about like a hacker planeswalker? And I asked that friend, and they were like, they didn't react well. They're like, how? Not like mad at me, but they like had no poker face. They're like, wait, how do you know that exists? Which was a fun got 'em. But the most recent pull like this released multiple cool cards that were all Wild West themed. There was almost an ace, like a poker card that was a Magic card variant frame, and some other things. And I'm assuming Rick and Marshall will throw something up in a second. But first, just semi spoilers for this section. That's why I waited till the very end to bring it up. But this seems like Carson, does this vibe feel like a farther reach or a less farther reach than Kamigawa and New Capenna?
I would say this is not as far of a reach. Certainly less far than New Capenna, and I think less far than Kamigawa with the Gundams as well.
There is a little bit more fantasy-ness to the genre of the West, because it was before electricity existed.
Really, the only part that is really weird, would be weird for me, is the firearm archetype, the gunslinger archetype. If they can find a way to get around that in a magic-y way, then home run, slam dunk.
Shoot fireballs from your hands, right? I mean that one, right. That's easier than. I mean, they showed characters with guns, I think, in these leaked poll things, but I do think that there is an easy opportunity for.
It's doable, but will they do it? Is kind of what I'm worried about.
Well, sure. So I don't know anything about these surveys, but if you're talking about guns and the Wild West and Magic, again, tabletop RPGs. I don't know if you played Deadlands. That's straight up Deadlands. Right. It's like post-apocalyptic Wild West, demons in your blood casting spells. That sounds kind of rad to me, and I'm here for it.
Oh, I'm super down. And yeah, like there's like really cool devil demon stuff in the middle of a desert. And like I tweeted last year that I really wanted also like a New Orleans gambling casino masquerade Wild West like set, and I would love to get some of that vibe and like get like swamps and like the bayou and like alligator folk like fighting against cowfolk maybe in the West. That might be too far.
Yeah. I think that still falls under like the purview of sci-fi, because it's like still an adventure kind of thing. There's some weird like magic and some stuff going on. There's something exploring going on. It feels very like sci-fi fantasy, and under that broad umbrella, I'm down to see what it is. But yeah, that straight up sounds like Deadlands to me. So.
And there was a Borderlands 3 DLC that was just Wild West, straight up Wild West.
Yeah. I think it's pretty easy to extend it into that without too much effort. I think you'll have more of an issue of like balancing the Manifest Destiny problematicness parts of the Wild West than you'll have, which they did an okay job with New Capenna. Like there are other issues there as well, and they did what felt like a very significantly better job than they have in the past with Neon Kamigawa. So I like, and this has been a thing that has been brought up, and this has been a concern that has been brought up when it has been brought up pretty publicly. So I think there is a level of awareness from Wizards to be aware.
There's certainly a reasonable expectation that they're aware of and addressing the problem internally in ways that they've done to varying degrees of success in the past.
Right. But I do think that like that era of like Louisiana Purchase onward, Wild West, vibes seems cool, and I'm excited for it. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts below. That is it for today's episode. Unless Joel, Carson, you have something else you want to say in the meantime?
I think the Louisiana thing, maybe it's just because we all play a lot, maybe too much League of Legends. You can have a Louisiana vibe and still have some weird like swamp monster creature and still have it be like magic. And there's definitely like your own type of Southern magic, and I think that's kind of neat.
Any amount of League of Legends is too much League of Legends.
Wow. Carson, how do you feel about the League of Legends secret layer from late last year?
Thanks to the internet, I'm deep in denial about that.
All right.
One other, I actually have one more comment about the Wild West. I think it's really cool how much folklore there is about that time period, considering that archetype only existed for like 15 years in real life. It was hilariously short compared to the amount of stories and folklore that surround that archetype.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's kind of why I was saying even extended into other 1800s Americana stuff or early 1800s Americana stuff without getting into the late 1800s stuff, because that's the stuff you don't want to touch.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the there's enough content for them to make multiple sets around just Wild West archetypes.
Yeah,
and
I
think they should just stick to one aesthetic for a set for the sake of continuity and clarity.
Bring back dexterity cards.
They could do it. I don't know. They could do it like cons where there's never mind. I retract that. It's doable.
Yeah, because I guess I think one complaint that I feel like you have with New Capenna is almost they didn't do that, right? They stuck too close to the source material, and it didn't feel like they created anything really that new in that world that they could have, or smushed it with another idea that would have been interesting.
Maybe that could be part of it, but also in New Capenna, like if you look at all the cards together aesthetically, there's like if you pick a random card, most of them there could be like any of three families that it could be a part of.
Sure, I think
like if you pick a black card, it could be any of the three black XY.
Yeah, families. I think that's a little bit of the flaw of like the shard system when the factions are so similar.
When you have five factions in one setting with one mostly cohesive aesthetic.
Yeah, well, plus they like started with like all five are crime families, and therefore they're all criminal, which is like a little weird. I think that was maybe my one complaint about New Capenna.
Yeah,
like, why are the lawyers criminals?
It's like why is the entire power structure of this city? Why are they all criminals? If they're the only powerful people in the city,
they would just be that's
right.
Normal. Yeah.
How are they criminals if they're the ones making the rules?
Yeah. That I agree with was like a little bit of a disconnect, and I get what they're kind of going for with how the Angels did rule it, but I think that there was a better way to have gone about how to establish that, where like one or two factions being criminals makes sense, right? If the and it all being corrupt makes sense, but it was like it started. They're all the crime families. Information.
It's like how in Gotham you have to have your Commissioner Gordon character and your Batman character for the criminals to be criminals.
Yeah,
for that to be a relevant descriptor.
Yeah. They could have very easily done like the Cabaretti are great party goers in the upper class, but secretly they're doing some shady stuff, and the maestros are the actual criminals that you'd expect. They own the lounges and they're doing criminal things. The riveters are really, the workers of the city, and they're actually bounding together to do X, Y, Z. There's ways you could have hit all this. Yeah, I agree with that. Those could have been established to be less samey for sure.
Yep.
All right. That is it. We're now at an hour and 40 minutes of recording. So a big thank you to Joel and Carson for letting me kidnap them for this episode. Thank you, all listeners. Thank you to our patrons. If you want to be a patron as well, you get a lot of cool perks. You'll soon be able to get access to. We're going to have a limited edition altar sleeve exclusive to our patrons. That'll be officially posted on Monday, and I'll create a tier hopefully by then. Fingers crossed. If that doesn't happen this week, it might happen the following week. We'll let you know. Also, we'll be doing. Every episode, there's a 15 to 20 minute early exclusive content to the patron. It's a bunch of cool, not magic related content. We talked 20 minutes about, I don't even remember, it was so long ago. What did we talk about? The MCU in general. It's often about the MCU. This one was a little bit more critical and more. And so it's definitely worth checking out. Once again, thank you to Channel Fireball. Make sure if you're going to Channel Fireball to buy cards, use the code MMcast. It's a great place to buy cards. They have great prices and really easy to find the cards you need. And please check out the Ultra Pro as well for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our patrons. And thank you to our editors who hopefully we'll be able to turn this into a great episode for everyone to have enjoyed. And please comment below with what you think about all of these things. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And we'll talk to you all next. Or wait, really briefly, Carson, Joel, where can people find you on the internet beyond the Twitters that you see below your name?
You can find me at the Twitter that you see below my name, or you can find me moderating your favorite content creator Discord spaces, our Rules Committee, Olivia Gober-Hicks, Tulane Community College. Yep.
Yeah, I've got the Twitter. I have the semblance of a YouTube channel where I do tabletop RPG stuff. But I'm usually guesting on a lot of people's streams to play Magic poorly.
Sometimes well.
Would you say masterfully? In a modern fashion?
Look, the only modern deck I really liked was Niv Magus, and that lived for like a day.
Wow. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Carson and Joel. We will talk to everyone next week.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media.